From the moment his campaign began, President Trump has evoked a certain tone. From campaign, election, and ensuing administration, there's been this shift in the rhetoric in the country toward a certain nationalist turn, a white nationalist turn most often. From riots in Charlottesville to rhetoric on the House floor to actual policy of immigration, the Trump administration has been defined by this turn toward a certain nostalgia for an America that's been idealized that no longer exists. Much has been made of this nationalist turn as a result of racism or economic anxiety. But in this project, I'm hoping to propose a new means of approach. I contend that this clamor for limiting means of entry into America, for limiting who counts as an American, is rooted in a particular kind of notion of place in America. I contend that the Trump administration is using legal and rhetorical means to try to shore up and preserve an American space. Now, when I say American space, I mean something very specific by that. Place and space is not just this place, this room. As academics tend to do, they went and made it more complicated. They created an entire methodology, an entire philosophical and sociological history of these two little words that seem so insignificant to us now. And rooted in this sociological and philosophical history, I think, is a new way of approaching what we perceive America to be. And to begin with this, I also need to begin with my way of understanding religion, because I'm using a very particular definition. I was actually just having a conversation earlier today about how many different definitions of religion there are, and there's something to be said for the malleability of religion and the way the field of religious studies approaches this, finding their need and altering their definition to approach their study. Thomas Tweed, who now teaches at Notre Dame, a few years ago was seeking to study Cuban Catholic immigrants in Florida. And he was viewing the feast day of Our Lady of Charity, the national patroness of Cuba. And as he's viewing this ritual, this context of Cuban Catholic exiles and this convergence of immigrant community and Catholic ritual and Cuban nationalism and hope for Cuban liberty, he found that the definitions at his disposal just didn't quite do it all justice. There are too many different streams coming together, and he needed something new to try to adequately and accurately express that transnational migration that fueled this particular religious experience. And so he sought a more mobile definition. The book, titled Crossing and Dwelling, describes the way that he views religion as fully related to the way that humans seek to orient and locate themselves in the world. Movement back and forth, that crossing and dwelling is central to the way that we experience religion. Dwelling in the sense of this temporalness, that we're rooted in time but not permanent. Religion has this temporary nature to it, but there's also a crossing. You're rooted and you're dwelling in this place that's always changing, but you're also crossing borders, whether through ritual, rites of passage, moving up in office or social location. There's this rootedness, but also this constant movement. It defines human experience. And I feel that this definition is really helpful for thinking of an American space, because this is a dwelling of sorts. The nation is a location. It is where Americans are rooted in the world. It is how they view the rest of the world. It's through the lens of this space that I exist in, America. But it's also temporary and forever changing. Borders are not always the same. Territories are grabbed up and let loose. People in different areas we consider to be American territories are sometimes treated as Americans and sometimes not. There is a flux to what counts as America. But at the same time, it is still, at the end of the day, a dwelling. It is our American space. So drawing on Tweed, I'm hoping to argue that civil religion is the means of building up and structuring the American space. And by civil religion, as we've heard about today, we have this term for religion that is supposedly separate from Christianity or Judaism or the other religions of America, but is nonetheless powerful and nonetheless shapes the way that we live our lives. We first see the term in Jacques Rousseau and his Social Contract, but it's in a much different form than what was later proposed by sociologist Robert Bellah in 1967. This is a system made up of symbols and rituals, the flag, the Pledge of Allegiance, the monuments and memorials of Arlington National Cemetery. It's this way of taking the national history and making it accessible to the larger public. Now, the way this is done is mediating a particular identity, a particular way of understanding American history. And the problem is that when that happens, certain strains of American history are left out. A very particular story has been chosen, and there's a particular through line of American history that is privileged as the national American mythos. And in this way, civil religion is narrowing what American identity is. And as the American space is viewed through the lens of civil religion, there's a narrowing of who falls within that space and has a true right to that space. In creating this space, Yifu Chuan, a scholar of humanist geography, he discusses this difficulty of creating that identity. And how do we do that across a unit so large as the nation? He thinks it's impossible to be truly patriotic and have a true love for something so large as a nation. Beyond the level of the city, the small unit, how can that be possible? These memorials and monuments, what Tim Cresswell calls the places of memory, provide those means of access. And there's certainly debate to be had over whether these spaces are actually accessible to all. But at the end of the day, we can agree that this space is telling a particular story. And the way that it is being utilized by the Trump administration has a particular aim. So how is Trump working to vitalize and reinforce this particular American space? And he's using multiple means to do so. Primarily, there's rhetoric. And on this, it's not just Donald Trump. It is very often Donald Trump, and it is a lot of Donald Trump. From tweets, when you're doing this sort of work, this is one of the few fields where you need to make sure to check Twitter before you step on stage, because things change so quickly. But there's this culture in politics right now that starts at the top. And this rhetoric of describing migrants, beginning from the start of his campaign where he describes them as murderers and bringing drugs and rapists, and he has this very negative image, to now he's describing the migrants that are coming. One day it's a national emergency and a crisis and it's too dangerous to travel. Today he's saying it's like they're taking a trip to Disney World because it's so easy to seek asylum. There's a shift in the way he's describing the experience, but a common goal of just delegitimizing those seeking asylum and delegitimizing the process of coming to America for those from the South. But it is not just Trump. We know, of course, about Steve King and his continual efforts to prop up the idea of this noble white Anglo-Saxon history. And white nationalism is holding sway in the American populace. Only this morning at a House congressional hearing on white nationalism and white supremacy spreading through the internet, YouTube had to actually shut down the comment section because the comments turned so badly racist so quickly. This is a trend. This rhetoric and language of white nationalism have spread from the top and spread widely. And this language, it reflects a particular identity and assumptions about this idea of what is truly American, who truly belongs in the American space. Muslims and Jews and those outside of a particular white Christian mold don't fit that norm and often find their religious identity delegitimized, find themselves dehumanized, not worthy of the same rights in the eyes of those making these arguments. It's this limiting opportunity for coming in, and that's where we come to this legal discussion. This means of limiting legal immigration is not new. It is not purely a Trump administration phenomena. We can look back to the Chinese Exclusion Act or the Dillingham Commission from the early 20th century, which brought experts together. Social scientists was a supposedly objective attempt to quantify current immigration at the time and make fact-based decisions. And the result was a demonization of Southern and Eastern European immigration as dangerous. The putting in place of a literacy test for legal immigration, and for the first time a quota on the number of Americans that can come in. So while only recently Donald Trump has declared that America is full, this is not a new idea. The idea that the influx of new and different groups is somehow unsettling the American space is not new. It's an American ideal in some unfortunate ways. But in recent days, we have the promotion of, quote, high-skilled immigration, the idea that certain immigrants with certain skills that are valuable to the American economy are somehow more important to America, and they have a right to come in. There's the efforts of Tom Cotton and Stephen Miller to limit legal immigration at all, the idea that the American population is changing so much and influx so quickly that if we allow too many people in, the whole experiment falls apart. And then there's the Muslim ban, an executive order with a number and a name that protecting the nation from foreign terrorist entry into the United States. But has been described frequently by President Trump and others as a Muslim ban and with an origin in terrorism in Muslim majority countries. And while there are supposed exceptions for those with the legitimate desire to seek asylum, as of yesterday, only 6% of those seeking waivers have been approved to this point. So despite the supposed compassion of exceptions for asylum, there's a commitment to just purely limiting immigration from these Muslim majority countries. Returning again to the southern border, you have the former Attorney General Jeff Sessions' zero tolerance border policy, which is rooted in this idea that those that are seeking asylum are just following a script and are trying to work the legal system to find a way in without a legitimate claim to asylum. And then we have the wall. And this is where the idea of the American space reaches its fullest expression. Because with the wall, you have a physical symbol of the edges of the American space, which is not necessarily needed to delimit where America ends. And it is not the only way to express power to define where America is. For those who study place, the exercise of power through cartography is also common and is by no means irrelevant to this discussion. When new colonists came to America and interacted with Native Americans, they were told where places were and then they drew the map as they wished. They created what America is, irrespective of the differences in geography. And in the same way, the border line, signifies where American power is, and the erection of a wall is the placing of memory that I described earlier from Tim Cresswell. That wall represents American power and also the American limits of the American space. It's a visible symbol of sovereignty to show American power. Whether the wall is ever built or not, that visible symbol of sovereignty, even in just the imagination, is somehow hearkening to the days of American glory. The idea that America is what it always was. We are strong and we are unified in a very particular way. Using this place-based approach, we can see that the idea is of a particular idealized American space, with a wall to shore that space up in the same way that you would fix the foundations of a falling house. But at the root of this is a civil religion that lets them believe that there's a particular America that needs to be saved, that an evolving America is a dangerous thing. At the root of this is a need to evolve our civil religion, to create a civil religion that in itself mediates an American space that reflects the actual diversity of a changing America. In the hands of the Trump administration, civil religion, which was meant as a tool for unity, has been weaponized as a means of exclusion. And there needs to be legitimate change. It'll be fascinating to see in the future as the American populace continues to change, whether there will be a similar change understanding of the American space. Thank you.